Hello everyone. Now, before we get to this video, I want to shout out BlitzApp, whose creators have very generously decided to support my YouTube channel. I know what you're thinking. The league's been out 10 years, you've got your own solution, the websites you go to. Blitz is different, and let me show you why. I recently cast a game where Tarzan popped off on Lee Sin. So, clicking on Lee Sin in the client, you'll notice that BlitzApp loads up Tarzan's rune page. Already, you're like, okay, this is nice, tell me more. BlitzApp is the only app that can auto-import Tarzan's rune set straight into the client. Loading into the client, you'll notice, opening up the shop, you got Blitz's suggested jungle item set, but there's more than that. These are recent pro builds loaded of very notable players. You can jump in and play Lee Sin like Tarzan does, and I hope this quick run through shows you that BlitzApp's doing a little bit differently, and it's seamless and awesomely integrated. You can download the Blitz app at blitz.gg. Links are in the description below. Okay, so first VOD review of the night. We're living in the light as always. It is Counter Logic Gaming versus Cloud9, and it's cool to finally get a chance to review CLG, you know, an org that I would have considered myself a card-carrying fan of back in 2010 when I started playing the game. Who's gone through a lot in the history of League of Legends, done a lot of notable things. My good friend Monty was their coach for a while, represented North America with pride at MSI 2016, but, you know, fallen on hard times for a long time now. Like, it's their second slump in terms of popularity and results after Season 2 when they picked up Voyboy and went to North America. That was kind of their first slump when TSM ran over all the NA tournaments while CLG were a bit out of sight, out of mind playing the OGN tournaments, and grew their fan base then at kind of the cost of CLG. And then now, obviously, in the kind of post-2016, so 2017, 2018, 2019 spring era, CLG have been, you know, pretty irrelevant, all things considered. So it's cool to see them back and competitive in the LCS, which is pretty good. The memes, they write themselves. The rivalries that haven't meant something now have a bit more sharpness around them. And the roster they have is an intriguing one. You know, they've brought in Ruin for the top lane. Darshan, long-suffering top laner, finally out. And it's fun to compare them to you know, Cloud9, especially Cloud9 running their main roster. You think of CLG, and I think of one of the biggest separating points between the two lineups is mid lane. You know, you look at the effective champion pool for Power of Evil, and you know what sort of champions that he plays. He's very much an Orianna, Victor, a wave clear player. He's much more of a mid laner than someone who takes the mid lane role. And I know that's, you know, not the clearest differentiator, but he's not someone you would assume would kind of excel in the Flex Assassins Worlds 2018 meta. You think of him more as someone, especially with his play in summer, that's much more in a 4-1 kind of scenario. Like he loves to wave clear on Ori. Nationals Tooth Orianna, never forget, right? Is kind of one of those big points of call when it comes to the side of CLG. Meanwhile, Cloud9, Niski and Licorice, overlapping champion pools, happy to play the Silas's, Akali, Aurelia, the multi-wave flexes. They're very much a 1-3-1 team. Like, I think of C9 as 1-3-1, the power level of Niski and Licorice, and being able to wield that through strong Svenskar and jungle pathing. And for CLG, it's Wiggly covering mid lane until mid lane feels like he's strong, and also the potential for the bot lane to carry if given enough resources. Like, Stixxay has always been a pretty resource-intensive player, whereas Sneaky is a resourceless AD carry, right? Like, Sneaky very much plays a prey and gorilla kind of style, especially more and more recently in 2019. Blue side win rates for both, 6-1 for CLG, undefeated for C9. So very much because of the power of first picks. And neither of these teams, I mean, this is influenced a little bit when Kumbo's in the roster, but when I think of who really wields counter picks well, like, I would definitely say it's C9 over CLG, but I feel like C9 also have the Um, ability to flex pretty decently between Niski and Licorice, so maybe that just means that the early priority, especially in the start of the season, is enough for them on blue side. Like G2 are also a fiercely blue side team right now with a lot of flexibility. But let's just get into the review. Like, let's start off the way we want to start off with picks and bans here. We can jump in. Good old Captain Flowers and the returning Jat on this one, which was, of course, hype. We can jump through the bans. We'll get there. Still on patch 9.13. We'll look at some of the finalized bans. CLG, Yasuo. And the Yasuo early ban is a little bit surprising against C9. But obviously Niski can play it well is kind of a big takeaway there. I'm not sure if Sneaky was practicing in the bot lane, but if they have a mid laner and also the bot lane flex happening with the Yasuo, I don't hate it as a ban. Kiana ban, fine. Sejuani ban. It's something that Svenskeren really likes to default to. I think a lot of junglers are returning to hard early crowd control champions, and while Sejuani is that to a point, the Jarvan priority we see in a lot of regions is kind of very indicative of that. And it's going to be a Sejuani ban here, which does relieve a lot of pressure when it comes to champion pool. Because the thing about Sejuani is that in Korea, we only ever see Sejuani in combination with a first-round melee champion that usually is a top mid lane flex that actually stops you from playing wave clear champions as easily. Like if you want to play a Victor mid lane or an Orianna mid lane, you don't want to face Sejuani Aurelia. You don't want to face Camille Sejuani because at a certain point, level 6 for both, there's not really a safe place for you to position, given that naturally supports get to roam through mid lane whenever they go for their back timing, and those champions have such hard and reliable crowd control that just banning Sejuani is like a one ban that can make Power of Evil's life a lot easier, because it's kind of like banning Aurelia, to some degree Yasuo, but he has the Gragas combination and other picks, so it's kind of like a multi-way ban. Yuumi Karma bans, so taking away some of the lane presence. Like, if I look at these bans, I'm like, aha, this team wants to play around mid lane. This team wants to play around anywhere other than bot lane, because you're doing double bot lane ban here. And amusingly, in future patches, Jarvan might return to becoming a bot laner, so maybe we'll see Spirit back in the LCK. Kind of a wink and a nod to that one, but this is mostly the bot lane relieving here. You don't want lane crushing potential supports when you don't play around Sneaky and Zeyzal. You do want to play around Power of Evil, so why not ban 3 champions that amp up the pressure on mid lane? Blue side Tahm Kench ban, and I must admit, you know, I've watched some CLG games, but I haven't like paid close attention to their pick ban trends. In Korea, first pick Tahm usually threatens the Sona or the Varus when it comes to the pick, and it kind of depends on what your read is on the enemy team. We're going to see what C9 pick up here. I saw this pick and ban, but I didn't like it. Didn't stay with me. So at the end of the day, I don't remember pick for pick what C9 chose. So when you see Braum into Tahm, you know that you can pick any AD carry. Like, you don't feel pressured to play Varus, because in fact, Braum is a pretty good answer to Comet Varus, and that's the most laning presence you can get from a Braum lane. Like, you can go Braum Varus, that's the most you get, but Varus Tahm is the strongest laning Tahm Kench lane, so it makes sense to steal away the Braum because it's something that answers Varus Tahm Kench nice and easily. So it's very high priority for Braum, and it does invite CLG to go Sona Tahm if they want it, and we know for a fact they do play Sona here. But the Braum pick is because at the end of the day, C9 are in a very weird spot as a team, and we'll get through the first round of picks before we fully give an opinion on the first round of the draft. Like, you pause it here and you look at the draft and you say, okay, so it's going to be Sivir Braum versus Sona Kench. Like, that's going to be the bot lane duo that comes out here. It's actually a bot lane duo that Sona will be able to farm it out against pretty easily. And if you don't get any extra resources, if C9 don't play bot side, Sona's going to get a very fast 500 gold quest cash in and be able to be turned online, at the normal time, at the reliable time. And yes, Sona was nerfed, and yes, there's no Tahm Kench to make her invulnerable, but Sona still is a very powerful mid-game champion, a kind of first big item done. So Lich Bane, for example, and also with the ability to put down a lot of spotting wards to contest something like Baron. So the power of Sona may not be overwhelming, but she's still such a strong grouping champion that giving her a free laning phase is never something you want to kind of guarantee. But you look at, okay, if I look at C9's draft, I'm like, where the hell is Lux Sivir? Because I think Lux Sivir is the high pressure version of a Sivir lane that gets turret plates, that can take turrets, and has a lot more turret threat, that even without a lot of resources should do pretty well in terms of actually kind of dominating the lane, or at least keeping Sona and Tahm Kench a lot more accountable. But because Cloud9 are a team that is so resourceless bot lane, it kind of reminds me of whenever I would talk to Gorilla about Rocks Tigers, and I guess we're talking more into the Longzhu Kingzone era, where I'd be like, what's the deal with all the Karma and Zyra games? Like, you guys are really struggling on the range support picks. And you say, look, no one will ever go bot. Like, a jungler never comes bot lane. We get no resources. I can only play Tahm Kench or Braum if I'm going to get no jungle attention. Like, I can't function without those two. At that time, Alistar was a bit stronger, so you could just play Alistar and mostly get away with him. But now it's a lot harder to run Alistar in lanes, especially with all the range supports. And I think that Braum is very symptomatic of how C9 are set up. Like, C9 are set up in a very predictable way of nothing for bot lane, lots of plays around the map, and sometimes around the map can spill into bot lane. Like, that can happen for them. But the moment that you're drafting Sivir Braum here, you're giving a very long leash for CLG, and you better have a very explosive mid-game draft that can punish a grouping comp that's going to group at certain timings. The Jace was taken first round here, and they're actually going to get 2 bans to relieve pressure from, Licorice's effective champion pool. You would expect this to be Ruin in the top lane, not a guaranteed thing. We've seen more and more of the mid lane Jace. I think the Lee Sin pick here, I know some people had some umbrage with, like, just Lee Sin first round is a bad thing. Like, I think Lee Sin is very strong against Sona Tahm Kench. Like, Lee Sin as a champion against Tahm gets the 2-for-1 special on ultimate. If you can kick Sona away from Tahm, there's no Taric ultimate, she'll die. Jace as a laner is going to overextend, and Lee Sin has a lot of gank pressure there. I have no issue with the Lee Sin first round pick. With Jarvan Sejuani ban, there's not a lot of junglers you would step up and shout like, hey, like, this should have been taken instead. So some of Power of Evil's safe wave clear champions are banned away. We know about his Victor. Feels like we got Power of Evil and Crown repping the fort on that one. Meanwhile, CLG, like, you look at the bans and, like, CLG desperately want to play Corki, right? Like, if you look at the bans here, the Veigar is a ban into Azir and Corki. And I think at the end of the day, if you see a Veigar ban, they really want to play Corki. The Akali ban, I mean, Akali's not necessarily hard good into Corki, especially early, but in the side lane it can work. Akali's usually seen as a ban into Yasuo, but that's already banned, right? So at the end of the day, they're screaming that they want to play Corki on blue side. And Cloud9 will want to hold Licorice's pick until they know what Ruin is likely to be playing. So at the end of the day, the Vlad comes in. It could be mid, and we see Vlad mid into some of the meta champions in Korea. But it could be top as well, right? at the end of the day, it is going to be Corki as we hard expected. The jungle pick here was one I wasn't sure because I didn't know which way Wiggly would go. Like, his team has no front line at all, so it's really hard to play a lot of junglers here. And in the end, it's going to be Skarner. So they go for Skarner here, and Skarner's punishment is someone he can actually gank Vladimir post 6, so I think that can be powerful. When it comes to priority, he's not expecting lane priority bot lane, but he's not expecting lane demolition bot lane. And the end result is that we just get a Malphite lock. So we end up with the drafts. We can fast forward a little bit here. And we end up with some pretty intriguing drafts because Cloud9 put everything into teamfight. Like, this is a teamfight draft coming through from C9, which is against a comp that has got a grouping champion like Sona that's very often going to get a vision lead. And I would say that overall, C9 should be able to find initiations that work against CLG. Like the Sona, the Taric not being there removes kind of the guaranteed demolition that Sona comps would take. That's why Sona Tom has to be talked about with slightly different language than Sona Taric's reputation in the past. And yet, if you have kind of a pressure top laner, because Jace has priority on Malphite. Like, Malphite was picked in Korea as a counterpick to Camille, and that was actually very successful because Camille has to take hookshot trades, and then Malphite autos, QE, like he's guaranteed to land everything. It's actually a lot harder against Jace. Like, against melee champions, Malphite can actually be a situational counterpick, but I'm not a big fan of Malphite into Jace until quite late in the game, when obviously you can just disregard the damage. So it's actually a Jace priority lane. Corki versus Vlad, I mean, Corki actually has priority for the early game as well. And the moment you saw Sivir plus Braum, you're not thinking that Svenskeren's going to have Sivir and Braum slowly build up waves and then turret dive Sona Tam. Mostly because it was a first round Braum and also C9's reputation of playing around other lanes. So it's not very likely that they'll have priority in multiple lanes on the side of C9. And yes, they probably win gold is even, vision is even, ARAM team fights. We're in North America. There's a chance the game goes that way. If it's about conditional vision, i.e. setups around Baron or Drake, Counterlogic Gaming have more wards. Like, Tom Kench has Sidestone, Sona has Sidestone. Like, they'll have access to more vision. They can check with the Corki Q. Like, at the end of the day, from behind, like, Malphite can walk up and ult out, I guess. Lee Sin can walk up and ward jump out. Vladimir, Braum, like, there's a lot of thick boys. Like, it's a very tanky lineup. But that's their only way to check pits, right? They've got only blue trinket and, I guess, skill shots over the wall. Like, if this was a Lux, you have the ability to check with your ultimate and your E, and then you have a bit more temporary checking. But when you're against a team with an extra Sightstone having only blue trinket and just face check, it's actually really hard to contest vision and not lose the teamfight ults. Like, yes, Malphite didn't die, he just ulted out, but then suddenly Sona's under way less threat than if Malphite ult was up. So it's quite tricky to pull off the draft from Cloud9 to get the team fights that should be heavily in their advantage kind of post 27 to 30 minutes. And even then, if it doesn't become about team fights, whether that's from Vision or Counterlogic Gaming having a very strong Siege duo with, or Siege trio, we should say, with Sona, Corki, and Jace. Like, there's team fight settings where CLG can snowball and their Siege is just way better and forces Cloud9 to engage on them. So overall, it's actually really hard to pull off this C9 draft. So when I saw this, I was like, I'm pretty concerned that Sona Tom will just get to farm it out here when I saw a first round Braum. Now, I didn't watch this game. I saw the draft and then closed it because I was like, okay, this could be one of our reviews for the week. So I'd only seen up to this point. I know who wins, but I don't know a lot of how it happens. So that is your info dump coming into this one. So what I want to see from C9 is deep vision on the red side to start up some, not necessarily vertical jungling, but to put some pretty high pressure onto the onto Stixxay and Bifrost. The usual way that you play out a draft like this is that you do have decent kill pressure with ganks, but not in the 2v2. Lux Sivir can 2v2 do a lot. Sivir Braum farms out 2v2, but with a third can actually turret dive reliably with the Braum passive. So you really want deep red side vision in order to actually set up slow pushes. Because if you're not setting up slow pushes as Zeyzal and Sneaky around the bot side, Stixxay and Bifrost are just getting more gold than you. You need to put them under high alert. Now, we don't actually end up seeing that vision. And that's, to me, pretty disappointing because we just go back and consider who's posturing, right? Like, if we just pause when we see the bot side, hey, Jat's talking about the same thing. There was the arrow walking in. It's Braum Sivir, who are very, very strong at level 1 when it comes to invading. Sonatam don't really put up any sort of defense, especially compared to a 2 or 3 man unit. But C9 just go ultra defensive here, and it kind of tells you, right, we're definitely not going to be playing around bot side. Maybe the call is from Licorice saying, hey, I need vertical jungling, I need an early gank to deal with the Jace early, but I feel like the game, whenever it's a Frostmancy bot laner, has to become about the bot lane. Like, you need to make a play that threatens melee range Tahm Kench from farming, and then slowly bring in waves to take down the very squishy Sona. And we're not going to see that here. And if you notice, the ward, which was placed much earlier, let's see the ward when the ward is placed. The ward is placed and it's pinged out by Licorice, but it spots Svenskaren's pathing, which means that yes, Svenskaren will get a full clear, but you're not worried about a skirmish early against the Skarner. And it's another thing that will relieve pressure. Like, you look at what's happening here, right? Let's talk about the bot lane. So, Sivir Braum, much stronger level 1. Tahm Kench has no level 1, and he's trying to farm because the Frostmancy lane, where he's the one farming. So at level 1, he's got a Q trying to poke for minions. He doesn't have Devourer, so he can't repel an all-in. And Sivir Braum have a very easy ability to stack up from level 2 onwards the concussive blows. So 100% of the time in this lane, Sona and Tahm Kench give up lane control because they want to be playing the lane around here. We always talk in mid lane about Aurelia wants to have it frozen just outside of turret range to threaten all in. Well, actually, Tahm Kench wants the lane here so he can melee range auto minions, and if they try to harass him, maybe they'll take turret aggro. He's under no risk of being ganked. And Sona wants the lane here so she can play around the minion wave line to just harass when Sneaky or Zeyzal walks up to CS or get a Relic Shield proc. So they want the lane to be here. So they're actually not as concerned about the wave being frozen if they can just body block it a bit and have the minion wave be largely here for the early phase before Sona gets access to last hitting minions, i.e. picks up 500 gold on her Spell Thieves. But the way you play against this duo lane is that you slow push in the minion wave as Lee Sin arrives bot lane, and then when it's, say, level 3 versus level 2 or level 2 versus level 1, depending on how fast you want to push the wave, Sivir Braum have huge gank assist to a Lee Sin when you have stuns, missing health damage, burst damage. Braum can tank the turret very easily. Like, there's a lot of kill pressure. So there's always the push and pull of, okay, we have to give up level 2. They get lane control. We need to know where the enemy jungler is. We can't allow ourselves to be turret dived. Because if you turret dive them or get a flash or get a teleport out, then Sona can't just farm till she gets tier plus the upgraded Frostfang. She can't just play the lane exactly how she wants. And you can't have a 7-minute transfer of the CSing back to Sona. We see that in the LCK. Griffin multiple times was able to get 7-minute quest cash in, and then everything fell into place from there. That's not acceptable. Like, you need to actually put a lot more threat. The moment that you've revealed yourself topside, it feels like CLG are much closer to getting the lane state that they want, i.e. as safe as possible, and Sneaky and Zeyzal are not putting bot lane under any threat. So what does that mean for the rest of the map? Corki is going to farm out just fine, CS for CS against Niski, and Jace going to push in Malphite, who has no ability to control the wave. So already, this is going kind of how we worried during Champion Select when it comes to CLG control in the early game, because we're looking for Svenskeren to actually combo with bot lane most reliably. Svenskeren can't gank top or mid. And also, top or mid is not the Akali Sylas champions that C9 looked best on, where they can just roam with a laner that can get priority and then invade with a jungler to get down CC and actually make picks happen. Like, you can't rumble with Vladimir and Malphite. And by rumble, I mean skirmish. Like, they're terrible skirmish champions pre-6. So Svenskeren just doesn't go bot because that's not a lane he goes to, and has lanes he can't work with. And that actually counts against him as, how the hell does this happen? No. No! Really? So let's talk about how this solo kill happens, why Malphite was seen as a counter pick into Camille before, and why it never happens in this matchup. Before any of this happens, Rune's still in lane. He's up, you know, a minion wave, as you would expect in the matchup, because range versus melee. It's Comet Malphite, which is about Qmax, which is about, you can go multiple different ways, but usually Trinity Force Sunfire Cape is what we saw in the LCK. This is a lane that works really well against melee champions, specifically really good into Camille, because it's all about trade patterns. Now, Jace's trade pattern is that he's a ranged champion when it suits him, and he's a melee champion when it suits him, and he never has to be the wrong type. So in this lane, obviously, when it's a range matchup, notice hasn't shopped. Now, it should be worth mentioning that Licorice didn't get a lot on his shop either, but hasn't shopped. So he is down a Doran's Ring level of combat stats in the 1v1. Still, he walks up, he takes the trade, and the goal for Ruin right now is kill this minion wave, get back, and try to get back to top lane without teleporting with an item lead. Now, it's possible that he's close to a Dirk, he's close to a Phage, whatever his first item is going to be, but his goal is not to kill Licorice, who just got a item lead over him. His goal is to reset the minion wave and come back. Instead, if we watch the trade, the range trade going really nice. Now, at this point, Ruin goes in for a trade, but actually his priority here is to AoE down the wave. He's hoping that Licorice will give up this minion wave. He'll be able to have the further ticks of W and his auto attacks take it down and then back away. Like, Ruin is not looking for a solo kill with an item disadvantage. Like, that's just not what you're trying to do. Now, he missed one of the W autos before. You think that's going to be fine, but he decided to all in and takes a crazy amount of minion aggro and then realizes that Flash is not going to get him out. Like, if you watch the trade happen as it's happening, right? Gets hit by an E, gets slowed in the minion waves, so he takes even more minion aggro. Like, let's just try to count how much minion autos he takes. I'm trying to watch here the minion autos. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now he's taking the entire backline, and the cannon gets how many shots in on him? It still hasn't released. Like, he takes a huge amount of damage from the minions here for literally no reason, and then dies. Like, it's super duper bad. Every single minion on the wave is going to aggro onto you when you Q onto him in that manner. From the start, it's a targeted ability that gap closes into all the minions. He takes so much minion damage and dies. Coming back to our analysis, you never have to get into this trade pattern. Let's show you what happens when you're playing Camille versus Malphite. Camille's a melee champion, so you didn't get to poke her down, and it's only trades like this Q aggressive trade that you can take against Malphite. So, if Camille's here and is like, okay, I want to push in the wave, she hook shots here, she gets in, does some damage, and then Malphite does the same thing. E, Q, W. If it's in the minion wave, Camille loses the health trade even through her shield, because her shield is not going to be enough. And actually, there's a chance that you get the magic damage shield and the minion damage goes through it. But Jace never has to take trades like that because he's a ranged champion. However, Ruin just completely disregards the amount of caster minions that are grouped up, completely disregards the item disadvantage, goes into effectively a Camille-style trade by going human form and Q, and literally grants a kill over. So it's just a straight-up laning mistake from Ruin that should never happen. Like, there's never a way that Licorice should get a flash in this lane, let alone trade flashes before 6, and then have his jungler can come up at level 6 and they just get a free kill with the Malphite ult. So very, very poor gank timing here. So very, very poor lane play there between Ruin and Licorice. Like, really, really poor, to be honest. This is an unforced error, is how I like to talk about it on cast, because it allows Licorice to vindicate his Malphite pick. Like, Malphite should always be 800 gold to 1,000 gold behind until he finishes like Sunfire Cape Tabby. But being able to have just as much, maybe more gold in the 1v1 is not something that should happen ever. How does this play start? So Vladimir on a back timing with Ignite, so they start up the Drake here. It's a pretty good Drake timing from Wiggly. So Svenskaren's wards on cooldown, doesn't have one, and actually has to completely disengage from just level 4 Tahm Kench. That was very interesting in terms of that happening in that manner. It's because Vladimir had no priority and came from so far away. But very peculiar passage of play here. I guess Sven solo walked through a control ward and then just was outnumbered instantly. If you notice, Sneaky's not actually able to brawl at all. Like, he walks up, he gets a little bit of zoning away, but they just get pincered here. So it's just an outnumber that forces the early flash coming through from Svenskeren. A little bit embarrassing, but good call in chat. And it's the point that I was going to get to after I worked out why this happened. Consider the state in which this Drake is happening. Sona Tahm have 40 CS on the Tahm Kench, of which 7 was shared. Maybe 6, but we're going to guess 7 was shared with Relic procs. Meanwhile, Sivir has 43 CS, so Tahm is only 3 CS behind the Sivir. And this is what happens when you don't slow push minion waves and don't have the Lee Sin making bot lane visits with grouped up minion waves, is that Tahm Kench as a melee champion just gets to farm out. And Brom's harass level on Tahm Kench is so different to Lux's. Tahm Kench walks up to, let's guess, a melee minion. They're the safest. They're usually the ones he wants to get. They're going to push up first. And you think of what Lux can do in the scenario. Remember, Lux was left open is Lux can auto-attack from 600 range. She can throw out a Q, potentially an all-in there with the Sivir Q and 300 damage from far away. She can throw out an E. She can shield her 80 carry, so minion aggro doesn't matter, and you can just auto-attack the Tahm Kench. You're very able to get that Tahm Kench, melee champion whose last hitting's health bar, a lot lower. Meanwhile, Brom, when he sees Tahm Kench walk up, especially if the lane state is somewhere safe, like we were alluding to, near the turret on the bot side, like Brom can't Q through minions, doesn't have any other ranged harass, his ultimate's not available, that's his only other ability that can make him accountable, and can't melee range auto because he'll draw minion aggro as well. So there's not really any way for him to interact with a melee champion auto-attacking down minions. And we've just had so few examples of scenarios like this where a melee champion can really easily CS. Like, this is a free lane for Sona Tahm on paper backed up by a free lane because C9 don't have a plan around harassing down or diving the Sonatam catch. Like, it's a really easy lane for Sonatam to play out. And people kind of talk about Sivir and how overpowered she is. And I think Sivir, gets a little bit hard done by in that Sivir has been able to really exploit the meta supports. Like Sivir plus Yuumi and Sivir plus Lux support makes Sivir's laning phase completely different. It gives venom behind a laning phase that's usually about AFK farm. And yes, in the mid to late game, even with those supports, she delays games for ages because she has wonderful wave clear, so I can understand the aggro that Sivir is taking. Her laning phase, as just a solo point, is not strong. All she can do is profit on an all-in or a gank, but she doesn't actually solo do anything alone. Like, she needs her support to really be the one to give her any lane presence. And Braum is not that champion. Lux is the definition of that sort of champion. Lux binding, when Tahm Kench comes up to auto-attack a minion, hits the minion first, gets a 2-second root onto the Tahm Kench, Sivir W, Q, gets a big harassment down. But if it's Braum, you're just not getting concussive blows, so you're not harassing down. So just the simple fact that Biofrost is CS for CS with Sneaky, and then you're starting Drake around a Sona lane, almost never seen. Usually this is a lane you guarantee priority for a duo. And then overall, you're getting to rotate down, but with Biofrost having more priority than Zeyzal and Sneaky because of the low health and mana bars, tells you that CLG are getting the freest bot lane. And we can actually check at the number here. It's 280, so it's not going to be the 7-minute charge up, but it is still a very comfortable farming phase for Tahm Sona. So Licorice returns back to top lane. You'll notice when his jungler is showing bot side, he has no all-in threat, so he's not going to be able to grow a CS lead or anything meaningful in the matchup. Rune's going the Dirk here, which is very interesting. Usually an auto include on any Jace build. In Korea, if some of our better top laners, like if Nogari's playing this matchup, the only way he's going Dirk is to group. Like we talked already that Corki with 2 items, plus Jace, plus Sona, like a lot of obnoxious harass, and you have access to more wards and can potentially play around Baron. But Dirk gives you nothing in the 1v1 against Jace. If you want to build for lane, you would go something like Blade the Ruined King, Black Cleaver in the build against Malphite. That's like the only one of the few builds. Like the build we always used to see from Smeb years ago, last time we had kind of super tanks in the top lane in Korea, on Jace would have been something like Yomu's Ghostblade, or Blade the Ruined King first, but then like Black Cleaver into a Last Whisper item, like heavy armor pen early. And I don't think Dirk does anything apart from letting you potentially try to run away from Malphite, which if you got hit by Q, it's not going to work. So this does say to me that CLG is going to be proactive in their grouping in this game, and maybe that's a byproduct of bot lane going so comfortably, is that Ruin's not going to have to play for lane as much as he usually does. Wiggly level 6, actually 1.5 camps ahead of Svenskeren, so in spite of drafting a bot lane that should need some level of babying in the early game, Skarner's just been able to free farm and be under, kind of no threat this game at all. So I really wanted to see Svenskeren go for paths that gave a lot of pressure onto bot. Like if we rewind all the way to the early game, because jungle pathing is so important with Sona comps. So we're at 7 minutes 43 now. We'll remember that. The sort of path I expected from Svenskeren was either force an invade and start enemy side because you have Braum, and then fall back and try to play around bot side and maybe look for a full clear of the bot side. If you can force Skarner into top, maybe you ward the top enemy blue and then do a 3-camp clear into grouped minion wave and threatening a dive. Or if you're going to say no, we don't want to completely give up on the Malphite top side and have Jace really run away with the lane, I wouldn't have hated red buff into blue buff or maybe Wolves blue buff into, again, frozen minion wave around level 2 to 1 or maybe level 3 to 2 into turret dive bot side, maybe like 3 minutes to 3 minutes 30. Like maybe fake out that you're on the scuttle, don't go exactly at 315 or 320 when most people will just be taking bot side scuttle. Instead, with no offensive vision, he decides to go for a super obvious full clear in vision. And that just means Svenskeren's path never actually makes it to bot. Like he never actually naturally paths to bot lane like he could be. He goes for a much slower full clear that gets to bot more when scuttle is up. If we watch what Skarner does, full clear of bot side, super greedy full clear build, not trying to be anywhere in particular, right? Just going for a full clear. He even takes Gromp before he looks top side. So because he saw Svenskeren clearing top, Skarner says, well, I can get level 4 and a scuttle top side completely for free, and I don't even have to be trying to play around lanes. Like if he even suspects that Lee Sin will be making a play like we talked about, looking for the bot side gank, your options are either be bot side to counter gank for a potential turret dive that Sneaky and Zazel are setting up for, or to go for a cross map play and have the Jace split push and slow push and look for a turret dive on Malphite, which admittedly, as a tanky champion, is quite a risky choice to make. Like it is definitely Malphite's not one of the most trivial people to try to dive, not a Sono when it comes to turret diving. So I feel like Wiggly is the benefactor here because he gets to do pretty much a mindless full clear. And at the end, on the other side, there was no threat actually put down by C9's early game. Like this early game is a little bit tone deaf for me about where this game could go when double Sightstone is online. People are asking about resolution. I can check. I believe it's 1080p. Yeah, it's 1080p, so sorry if the YouTube VOD is not the highest quality. Seeing the top side gank. Now, Malphite can't play weak side apart from repelling turret dives pre-6, but post-6 he can, in fact, ult away. But what I want you guys to understand is cooldown is pretty long. You don't fit CDR into the build early because you want to start building towards a Sunfire cape. And the reason why Malphite doesn't function into the Jace top side reminds me of other combos people have tried. We've seen combos like Cho'Gath Vi was played in MSI play-ins as a potential counterpick to Jace. Let's just say most Vi combinations as well. If you have a champion who requires ultimate in order to actually gank Jace topside, then that's a very, that's a window that can be exploited. One visit topside, a Predator, and suddenly the ult is down, and Jace returns to the natural lane state of, well, he can push in, get a little bit of priority, maybe find it difficult to take turret plates, but he's still able to do his thing and he's under no kill pressure. These level 6 champions against Jace, I think, are a lot less strong in the 1v1 because their abilities are either flashable or require the jungler to be there. And the resulting play on the other side of the map is going to exist in those scenarios. So as long as you see them coming, maybe you keep a ward around the Krug camp or a ward around here to spot for a lane gank. Malphite doesn't have a lot of presence as a melee champion versus ranged. So map state here. Finally, some control wards bot side for C9, but they're not spotting anything. The Rift Herald's spawning soon, and CLG have the priority top lane and mid lane around that. Oh, baby. So Svenskeren is spotted on 2 wards as he makes this play onto the Raptors. And this is super clean from the side of CLG. They start to walk down. Wiggly's not sure if he's going to be contesting the Scuttle Crab or his control ward or a mid lane gank. But the moment that Svenskeren leaves the Raptors up, like, you know he's coming mid lane. And so he's already in a position where you're against Vladimir level 8 with only a Codex and a Doran's ring. They get 1 kill from it, but we're zoomed in on one play. The priority that we mentioned C9 set up in terms of vision, it's not actually that important because they don't have lane priority around it. Sona's able to push in. Like, let's watch the bot lane here from Tahm Kench and Sona. And what I want you guys to notice is, let's look at the lane state from the time they return to lane. So at 7 minutes 30, the lane state is Svenskeren looking for a lane gank, Sneaky and Zeyzal pushing up. And we talked about how that's a safe place early for Bifrost and Stixxay to be. But watch the bot lane. It's in the bottom right. And yes, there are some things covering it. I understand that. But what I want you to notice is that as this play happens, the moment they see Svenskeren potentially coming for this gank timing, so not yet, but from this point onwards, it's actually a pushed lane for Sona Tahm against Sivir and Braum. Part of that is mana reasons. Part of that is Svenskeren is on top side. But Sneaky and Zeyzal play very predictably around having no jungle pressure. Like, that's the style that they play and they're most accustomed to. And we would see very similar things with Prey and Gorilla especially. And that just means that during this mid lane play, priority is actually to the Sona Tahm lane. The lane with the global is the one that has the priority to move to mid lane. And of all people to get chased down by at 9 minutes, it's 73 CS Tahm Kench that gets to roam through mid lane and actually make that play happen. And it's way harder now that Tahm Kench ult range is shorter. So just the fact that there's priority bot and a roam play like that can happen is again something you would never expect given the champions, like given the champ select here. But you would expect more and more thinking about the fact that it's Cloud9 in the game and they have a very, very defined style about what they do with their bots. So I think they definitely need to, on the fly, be willing to reevaluate when it comes to game states like this. Because the moment Sona Tahm comes in, the game plays a little different. And I don't think that's something that C9 responded to because they draft low pressure bot lane. They draft only all-in pressure in the 1v1, and it's Vladimir who doesn't have the ability to play with the jungler very well. Like, there's so many conditionals going on this draft. I think the people that circle one of them and they're like, what the hell, crappy Lee Sin early? I'm like, no, I mean, the Lee Sin I think is a pretty good champion. The way this can play is to wait for team fights and be strong. Like, yes, you could do that, but I don't think you ever want to do that against a comp that has both Siege and a Sona for setting up round objectives because there's too many game states that you fall too far behind in, and the team fight here is too anemic. So I think it just all came together rough, but I don't really blame any one pick apart from being heavily preferenced to a Lux as a response to a first pick Tahm Kench with the threat of something like a Sona coming out rather than the Braum. Like, that's the masterstroke here, is that the Braum makes perfect sense if this ends up being Comet Varus, lane domination style. But if it ends up being Sona, the Braum is way out of position. So I don't know what CLG's first thought was, but the second thought to lock in the Sona with the way that their team wants to play with their win conditions, I thought was super smart in this game. And the way they close it out is clean too. Like, you just look at the plays. CLG goes topside with double control ward priority. The Jace continues to be able to decide where the minion wave is against Malphite or to stop him along the way to contesting this. Power of Evil can walk up because Vladimir doesn't really have trade presence till 1.5 items in most lanes, and he's going for a build that's more about the split push. Bot lane roamed up to guarantee the Rift Herald because it's at 11 minutes. Like, the other thing that C9 can do is here. At this point in the game, Sneaky and Zeyzal are back in base. Malphite ult will be up by the time they get to the Rift Herald. It's 10 minutes in, and there's a lot of in-between items on the side of CLG. Like, yes, Hexter and Kashin, lovely for poking out Vladimir, but in a team fight, it's not necessarily going to be super big. He doesn't have his first power spike like a Trinity Force just yet. Entire Warrior enchant is done. Malphite ult and his kit in general. If it gets 2 or 3 members of CLG, they should be able to clean it up. This is a very clear timing to just say, okay, bot lane is a farm fest. My Sivir is only 4 creeps ahead of a Tahm Kench. Tahm Kench ults on cooldown. Let's go to the Rift Herald, take that, and guarantee it to buff up the laning phase of one of these lanes. Like, there's an argument for all 3 lanes to have an early Rift Herald charge. Instead, Sneaky and Zeyzal just go back to bot lane, and thus they give up Rift Herald control. Like, that's how these things work. Sona and Tahm are in lane. Therefore, if Sivir and Braum go straight to Rift Herald, you have Rift Herald control. Instead, by the time Sivir picks up the minion wave, Tahm Kench and Sona are roaming mid lane. They have the first ability to respond to the Rift Herald that's already leashed and control warded in multiple spots by a CLG. They're going to lose the Rift Herald. Like, there was that window to rush straight there. They made the call to go back to lane, and CLG take the information they have of, okay, these champions haven't shown the Rift, they must be going bot lane, make a smart call from it. They get the free Rift Herald, and Sona and Tahm even are going to be able to walk down and stop this turret from going down in a big way. Power of Evo is going to be able to get Hex Drinker and Trinity Force at a pretty good time. The moment you go Hex Drinker Cull, your first item spike is going to be later, but your 2-item spike with a defensive item is going to be way earlier. So getting turret plates and getting the sort of gold through Rift Herald charge means even more for a Corki if you've spent like 1,300 gold on a Hex Drinker than if you were just going Trinity Force, because you can play around not having a defensive item. It's much harder to play around not having the damage that you're used to having on a champion. To be clear, I don't blame Sneaky and Braum for misplaying this lane. I actually blame the game setup to not being able to play into what Sneaky and Braum's job is. Okay, let's watch this play. Like, it's very clear Sneaky and Braum were not intending to play this aggressively. Like, it's not like they were told to play aggressive and weren't. They're just playing a farm out style like they usually do. And we're seeing multiple skirmishes. They know Skarner's not there, so I assume that means Lee Sin's going in. Let's watch this slower. Crescendo is awesome in this case. I want to watch it again. When does he start casting it? Because that's a bit of a cast animation. You never see 3-man crescendos. Oh, he's already flashed. Oh, beautiful. Flash comes in. Biofrost pops his shield early. He has stopwatch up because it's 12 minutes for double TP play. Everyone can be there, and Skarner will be there as well. This is really well played by CLG. That shit is tasty. What's happening in the rest of the lanes for this to happen? Watch top lane. The moment that Lee Sin is seen in vision, Jace is running to be able to teleport. Like, Ruin is already well on top of this play. Trying to run as fast as possible to TP. Only when he sees Malphite walk away and wouldn't be in ult range does he make the TP come in. That means Corki comes in first. But Ruin and Power of Evil, they both have their lanes in a very decent spot to make this happen. Like, this is some tasty stuff when it comes to movements. I haven't been able to watch Corki. When does Corki get the TP off? Huh. So this was the play that happened on the other side of the map. They actually kill Niski in the transition, then Corki's able to teleport. I didn't even notice that first time through. 2 teleports come in before Licorice is able to TP. There's actually no kills left for Licorice to get when it comes to a turret dive. This is really nicely done from the side of CLG. Cool. I mean, and look at the payoff here. It's 12 minutes 50. Like, this is a game-losing play for C9's draft. Like, they've got a patient draft that can't afford to lose too much map control, and they lose so much gold in this play. Like, CLG play it really well, but C9 have these pieces that are so different to how C9 usually play their games, and it almost feels like they've got good champions that don't fit the roles that C9 want to use them in. Kind of like, I use this analogy, I believe, on Cast already, but it's like you've got character actors that can play a certain type of role really well, but they're just being forced to play a role they're not comfortable with. Like Steve Buscemi with his fellow kids like lampooning moment is like a that turned up to 100. But like Licorice is on, sorry, not Licorice. Licorice is on all-in champion that doesn't have lane presence, so he can't play forward. His forward percentage is over 50%, so he's known for playing forward. He's been forced back the entire laning phase. Niski's on a champion that doesn't play with the jungler very well, so he's been forced to farm. He doesn't take teleport because he wants Ignite for lane presence, but no one's coming mid lane. Bot lane can't apply pressure to a Tahm Kench Sona lane, and also isn't known for applying pressure, so there needs to be all-in pressure coming in from the jungler, but Svenskeren is full clearing. So there's multiple different levels of things that aren't working for C9, but what's most impressive to me is that CLG are making plays that require forethought, that require synergy and communication, and Ruin's English is obviously decent, but not 100% fluent. But they're recognizing where C9 is tripping up, and they're not playing C9 like it's C9, they're always going to play like C9. But C9 are playing CLG like it's CLG usually play. And the fact that those two things are different are very interesting to me. Like, I feel like CLG have been able to read C9's tendencies, but also see what C9 are doing this game and how it's different. And C9 haven't been able to do the resulting thing on the red side. Because like now it's a huge gold, like a 4,800 gold lead for Sona Tahm. How do you ever get vision back as C9 without just giving up your ults to make it happen? C9 getting something on the map. I think this is good here, actually putting down multiple members into the Sona Tahm lane. Like, there's no way you're going to trade evenly with where the game is at and where the power spikes are at. So I think you have to take an objective somewhere and ensure that you're in the game in gold in some way. Like, Sven is just trying to shadow the bot lane here. Now he's actually returning because they know Flash is down, I guess. Like, the only way this return works if it's a Braum Flash ult, which I'm not a fan of. So kind of peculiar. Yeah, CLG 1280 gold from plays. It's been a really big early game here. Like, 6 AM Biofrost know they have no reason to push up here unless they see Lee Sin. So that's why they're very defensive first. Even with flashes down, I think you never get a successful gank off there as Svenskeren. CLG take away a blue. They see what's happening bot lane. They know that if they send enough members, they have just a straight up siege team. Corki plus Jace plus Sona is a sick ARAM team and also a sick siege team. So they consider their options. They back away. It's a frustrating timing, but also an amazing timing for Power of Evil. He has Trinity Force, but he doesn't have Cull Cash in. So a little bit annoying that he doesn't get that done. But CLG have been able to will the map where they want. I think it's a result of having a lot of priority in their lanes, but C9 not being able to create priority anywhere. So we're just playing out here. And as a C9 fan, you're kind of already at the point where you're like, all right, well, we need a grouped team fight around an objective that we can fight honestly against. And you look at the minimap, and with all the extra wards available to CLG, you wonder where that will be. Meanwhile, CLG can rotate between. They have a global lead. They have Predator jungler lead. They have priority in the lane. So it's just nice and easy to pick up the kill on Malphite. It's only a kill, but it will get an inner turret pushed in. It's exactly at 23 seconds. So Malphite will want to go reset the top lane wave before the Ocean Drake comes up. Ruins a Jace, so going to take the turret nice and easy. And you ended up going no lifesteal, but did go the Black Cleaver to have some threat in the 1v1. Like, C9's options here are super low. This is definitely a game that we would call... Like, earlier in the game, like, we would have called this one very hard for C9 because of their lack of win conditions in terms of how to play out the game and how the game should go. It's LCS, and just like Korea this week, you can just make straight up terrible mistakes. But the mistakes are kind of on both sides. Sneaky's not really thinking about where Jace is going to be, so he easily gets taken down from the top side. They have no vision there. this sort of thing never happens usually. Like, watch this play. The play is that Jace gets to push because he got the kill onto Malphite. He runs up top side. He takes down top side in a turret. And then he roam kills mid lane. This almost never happens in a C9 game. So if you're sneaky in a normal game, being on this side and kiting up is correct because you're kiting up away from where you know the enemy team has set up all their resources. But Sneaky's kiting up as if he has a top laner with priority. And again, Licorice, who has over 50% forward percentage and usually is on a winning counter pick, isn't in that spot. He was going to answer a minion wave that was pushed into his inhibitor turret at 18 minutes, and he has no vision in the red side jungle, and that just means that Jace gets to roam slam Sneaky, just like Licorice could on Akali in a different game. So it's again Ruin and CLG playing to the current game state, and C9 not. So it ends up being just a really nice little playbook from there that's too easy. Like, this is where you probably would lose a lot of confidence as a C9 fan because you understand that like the team has no answer here. This is definitely a huge red flag for C9, and it's the sort of stuff that I think they will need to come out and answer the next time that C9 play, because right now it feels like we have a blueprint, and it's not an easy blueprint to recreate if C9 don't opt into it with the first the Braum and then the Vladimir and the Malphite when the picks came in. Like, they opted into having no lane with crowd control and a regular ability that can actually play around a jungler's priority. And they opted into refusing to play bot side that actually would have bailed them out of the lack of win conditions in this kind of point in the game now at 20 minutes. Like, C9 did kind of multiple levels of kind of disregard for what they needed to do to get to this point. But if you can recreate at least 50% of that and play as good as CLG has here, there's a chance that C9 don't have the other speeds, especially when it comes to best of fives and picks and bans start to alter. So I come away with a pretty big query on C9 based on this early game. For CLG, you know, as kind of their first review on this channel, I'm trying to look to see if they make the sort of silly errors that comps with this sort of a lead can fall into. Like, it's 8,000 gold. They have very strong siege, but if they're outmanned in a 5-man team fight, they can be outgunned as well. It's hard. You need to get more members there, but it, of course, is still possible. But if you put down control wood lines like they do and play between lanes like CLG is right now, there isn't too many ways to get back in, right? Here's C9 trying one of those all-ins. Q comes in. Let me watch the right side. I've been watching the left side the entire time. It is really bizarre, because if you watch, Power Evo kicks him away. Like, there's no flash involved there. Maybe he didn't flash. Then Sneaky walks up, and Wiggly is super good on reading the spell shield. What was attempting to be spell shielded here? Let's find out. Was spell shield ever used? I didn't see. No, it was no spell shield. Maybe it was a Corki R earlier, but I think it's because of this trick that we see players do. If you watch Wiggly, how he plays this. If you watch Wiggly, right? Wiggly backs away, his model turns around, then he flash ults, and Sneaky just can't twitch it. People are getting better and better about plays like that, where your model facing a different way is actually used to pick up kills. And that ends up being pretty big there. I believe that the Corki, sorry, that the Sivir spell shield was available on that play. Wiggly watched Lehen's Volibear. No, we're thinking of Life's Volibear on Gen G. He did the same thing there, but I believe spell shield was available and not used. It's possible that it was used before the clip and they timed it, But yeah, there's no turning radius in League, right? You always get the R instantly when you flash in. So that was just a really smart mind game from Wiggly. You know, a guy who's gotten a lot of praise from the NA analysts. I must admit, haven't watched him closely outside of a couple of CLG games this split, but it's impressive to see him decisive. Like that's the sort of play that you need to have a few good games and a couple of people circle jerking that you're a good jungler in order to actually go for the flash all in on a champion with spell shield. So we'll watch the replay and see if it was used. I don't think it was used there. I mean, someone can go to ProView and check. I don't see a spell shield used here. I'm going to try and see. I don't think spell shield was used there. I do think that it was just Sivir playing as if she could spell shield it and Wiggly surprising him. Players actually go through thought processes like that. Is playing to the current game state rather than their opponents usually do? Is it more intuitive, or do they actually go through that process? I think every pro player thinks about the game differently. You guys will see many interviews where it feels like 99% of pro player interviews, they say, oh, we just had the better draft. But you just know if the enemy team won, they would also say we have the better draft. So what those players understand about what is a better or worse draft, or what they take away about win conditions, is going to be different. There are some big brain players. There are some field players. There are so many different schools of player. But there definitely are players who... there definitely are players who can think about changing game states. Core JJ is a player that's been kind of complimented both in Korea and North America being able to do that, and there are players that aren't. But I'm just saying that I believe Wiggly's being a lot more decisive with his confidence levels, and I think that C9 have been really inflexible this game. Look at the Baron setup here. They can spot out basically every camp because they have all the extra wards. Like right now, they have one ward down. They notice that C9 has no wards in inventory. Like if you look, there's no control wards at all in inventory. So it's actually a smart start by CLG. They got double smite, so they were always able to get it here. Keeping Baron on Corki and Braum. Sorry, Corki and Jace are the two most important people on the side of CLG because they can then play multiple lanes. It's a good Baron start. They got tanky front line, they have infinite sustain, and they know there's no control wards on the enemy side, so C9's only option is all in. It gets close, so obviously you can say that it was close to a 50-50, but at the end of the day, when you have double smite and the control ward there, then it's pretty big. Oh, you're right. It wasn't a double smite. It was actually just a single smite. I heard the call from Jat, and I saw the cleanse from Biofrost. But you're right. It was only a single smite here. That was actually really close. Huh. That makes you reevaluate it a little bit, doesn't it? CLG almost. That was definitely going to be the turning moment there. Huh. Is there any chance they had double smite? Can we see it? We can look for it. Wait. Wiggly didn't even smite, right? You can look for the visual indicator. Yeah, Wiggly smites after. There was actually no smite. Huh. There was no visual indicator on either side. Wow. CLG really YOLO'd that one. He was stunned. You can smite through stun, Givens. just in case you weren't aware of that. The only status effect that stops you is stasis. So he actually just missed the smite, and it just happened to go through. So, okay, well, that was not the, that doesn't fit with the CLG playing super clean beforehand here, because, yeah. With the double smite, like that, I think that's a fine play. Given that they only had one smite, it's actually pretty fanciful, and no one used it. So, Stasis is what I mean. Suppression is what you guys say. Yes, that's what I mean. So suppression is basically like a form of stasis. But stasis and suppression, you can't smite through that. But you can smite through stun. Now, it's possible that Svenskeren was Skarner ulted. I didn't notice that. But at the end of the day, ends up being a pretty clean play. It ends up being a clean result, but not a clean play, right? So, where was Lee Sin when this play starts? So, Lee Sin's not there. That's why they make the play. So, that's an important bit of context that we missed on the first view. The stun comes through. There's no suppression effects on C9 and no stasis effects. So, CLG can definitely smite it. They just don't. So, that's definitely a good Baron start, but not having the double smite there makes it way harder. And they weren't actually able to pick it up. The Skarner ult, as we noticed from the fast rewind, is after Baron. Also, Lee Sin didn't hit the pit. So we get that info. And now CLG have the guaranteed game winner, which is Sona with this Siege comp. Like, yes, there's an all-in option for C9, but they definitely lose if they don't pull it off perfectly. Meanwhile, CLG can play 2 lanes super, super easily with Jace in one lane and Corki in the other. So the 1-3-1 here is pretty insane. They have Valkyrie, maybe the package potentially. It's probably better to play 4-1 just because Sona or Jace in a side lane would be a lot more at risk of being all-in by a Malphite. If Malphite's holding off the Corki, then I agree you can play 1-3-1. They're playing 2 lanes pretty smartly in that no one fast push top side, so it's actually going to slowly work its way to the top lane. You don't want all 3 waves to push at the same time if you don't have 3 people on each of those lanes, but Jace gets the prep minion wave top side to take down that turret. It's a really nice closeout here by CLG when it comes to playing lanes. Not every team can close out with a siege draft against a wombo teamfight draft smart. If you push the waves at the wrong time, sometimes they work against you. But this is a really nice closeout here. It would have had to have been a 4-1 that C9 would have been able to stave off if the minion wave top lane hadn't been correctly set up. But with a correct setup, like, it was super well done. And now Cloud9 is just trying to fight before the game ends. Power of Evil and Ruin out of position. Svenskeren gets the mini flash. How much are they going to get here? Are they going to win the game? Okay. See, and that's the trigger is pulled, right? The trigger is pulled here, but inhibitor is already dead, and top and inhibitor is dead, and a minion wave is coming very soon in both those lanes. And Cloud9 have been forced into, let's just 5v5. And a moment like this, the way it ends, which is a little bit comical, the reason why this is significant is it plays back into what our original discussion was, which was, how do you find that 5v5 team fight if the game doesn't go your way in the early to mid game against a Sona comp like CLG's? And Cloud9 finally finds people grouping, but this is the epitome of the game state not being where you want it, because the game just ends, right? Jason, Corki. Ruin's like looking for a swag stasis instead of trying to end the game there. That's a really clean close. Like, they were actually able to make that Baron buff power play is very explosive. It's very decisive. They close the game on it. They play 4 mid lane when they need to and get the structure there, then rotate to top side. and they make the good shot call to close the game. So that was really nicely done on the side of CLG. Like, they made sure that C9's comp could never do what it was drafted to. Meanwhile, they played around C9's tendencies of never sending resources bot side and usually being about a solo lane plus jungler roam when the solo laner has priority. Malphite never had priority outside of the solo kill early, which was just a straight up mistake from Ruin. That should have been cleaner. The Vladimir in a short lane, like mid lane, finds it hard to chase down Corki. There's very low kill threat there, and he went Hex Drinker nice and early. Then got the turret plates in order to have a fast Trinity Force. And bot lane went as expected in that Tahm Kench just free farmed, but they played around priority well. So I know a lot of people are C9 fans, and their fandom is much stronger than CLG's. For CLG here, you have Ruin's solo mistake in the 1v1 against Jace. You have the Baron play where they clearly weren't as comfortable with getting that smite or a double smite play or just getting a secure. Like, they got lucky that the Baron went their way. But you take away those two things, that the Ruin one is pretty minor. It's just, hey, don't play the lane that way. The Baron setup is maybe a bigger problem that could be diagnosed. But you take those two things away, and you just have an ultra clean performance from CLG. Like, watching that and seeing that CLG, when they're good, have a clean, decisive play style mostly, makes me want to watch them even more, because it's cool to see the team actually more than the sum of their deficiencies, like they have been for a very long time, as some of their roster issues have caused a lot of things. Ignoring bot lane is just not the thing to do at the moment. Look at G2 solo laners, and even they play around bot lane now, while Wunder is mostly on his own right now. I think you're right, and that bot lane priority is going up. I think there's a way to dodge bot lane and play other parts of the map. It just doesn't include being against Sona Tahm as a low priority lane, and then having laners with low gank assist outside of Malphite ultimate. Like, you can't do both those things and succeed in the current meta. There aren't many metas where you can delay for as long as that. So that's kind of my bigger takeaway there in terms of how that's doing. Couldn't they just send Vlad into Jace, as many LCK teams do, and take another mid champ? There are Dumb One Gaming mostly. There are other teams that try it. Jace beats Vladimir really hard unless the Vladimir player is better than the opponent or knows how to play the matchup. In a standard lane, it's Jace favored, and it's a lot of priority for Jace. So it doesn't give the Vladimir more ability to go past the 50% mark. And remember, forward percentage is what we always talk about with Licorice. You can't get that on Jace versus Vlad. You take it as the Vlad until you have 1.5 items, and then you either perfectly execute the all-in, or you need a jungler to help you. So it's not like it would have been straight up the better choice there. I agree with you that Licorice is kind of seen as the better player, so you could understand why fans might want that. But I think it's just a larger problem that the Malphite did them no favors in terms of the draft. And overall, C9 drafted into their worst tendencies and played towards their worst tendencies. And thus, a CLG team that was playing pretty good deserved to be the winner. So that's going to be my VOD review for first game of the day. CLG versus C9. Ended up being a very decisive close, which is cool, right? We're used to them holding on a little bit longer. That one ended up being decisive. So with that, I'm going to take a short water and dinner break, so probably about 5 minutes. I'm going to play some ads and come back with our second review of the night. We're ignoring the LCK. They're in the naughty room. We're going to the LPL. It's FPX versus IG, world champions versus undefeated Chinese team in game number 3. And it's got some hype in it for sure. So join us in a couple of minutes for the second review. Be right back.